Hey guys, welcome to Coleman Nation. We're going to be talking about the top 5 albums that you have probably never heard. I'm really excited because these are some of the songs that formed my musical tastes when I was younger. And these are some pretty obscure titles. So stay tuned. We'll get started here in just a second on the Coleman Nation. Here we go. So on today's episode, I wanted to do something that was a little bit outside of the box of what we've done so far in the episodes. I actually think that this is going to be a two-parter because there's another 5 albums that we're not going to get a chance to get to today. But I wanted to kick it off with 5 albums that really influenced me just musically and inspired me, just like it talked to me at different stages of my life. Like, I'm a musician. I studied music in college and playing guitar since I was about 12 years old. And, I was taught by my dad. And so I was really exposed to a very wide array of interesting music from when I was a kid. And growing up in the 80s, we had some of the best music that you could possibly imagine. But there were some albums that I still listen to this day that I look back on, and they really formed a tremendous amount of influence for me on my approach to songwriting, the things that I like to listen to, the things that I find to be humorous, which we'll talk about that in a second. And just, it really created this foundation of the way that I look at music and how I listen to music, because it's such a wide and varied group of albums that you'll hear here, that if you just got these 5 albums, you just programmed into Spotify or YouTube Music or whatever, you would just be blown away. Now, we're not going to play a bunch of the music just for the copyright stuff. Albums defined a generation, a couple generations, all the way from the 50s through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And it was only until we got digital music that it started to, fall out of favor. But I just really feel that, you take a collection of, 8 to 15, 17 songs, and you can see that it's a complete piece of art. There's a start, there's a change all the way through the finish of, that album. There's consistent themes, and I just really, I miss it. I miss the way that those things were. I think that this music that I'm going to go over today was some of the things that created, great foundation for me as a musician. But there is some great music today. Some of the stuff I listen to today is Chon, which is this shirt here, that you guys can see that I'm wearing. Animals as Leaders, Intervals, Meshuggah, Polyphia. These are some of my favorite bands to listen to currently. And just as a musician, I think that stuff is great. Ichika, there's some really, really great stuff. Sorry, a bunch of them are instrumental prog rock outside of Meshuggah, but there's some really, really phenomenal talents that are out there. And I think that they're cutting edge. So anyway, enough on that little divergence there, but let's talk about some of these albums and, what they meant to me. So the first one that I'll talk about, this one was from the late 80s, I think in 1988, 89. And this one was, you should definitely get this. It is an absolute, just phenomenal album. The more I listen to it, the more I think it is just a perfect composition. And that album is Beelzebubba by the Dead Milkmen. And the Dead Milkmen, they're kind of known as being this sort of like, tongue-in-cheek comical band. I think that, they would have been sort of a precursor to bands like Sum 41 and Green Day and some of those, sort of famous 90s emo rock types of bands. These were the guys that kind of preceded them. Probably their most famous song is Punk Rock Girl. And in my opinion, that's a great song. But in my opinion, I actually think that on that album, it's actually the low point of that album. I think it was the one song that maybe they were trying to, get a MTV-friendly pop hit. But, my absolute favorite song on that album is Stewart. It's about a conspiracy redneck living in a trailer, talking about all the things that are going on in his trailer park. But the cool thing about the whole album is not only are all the songs, again, in my opinion, absolutely perfect, but they they resonate on a sort of a social, political level more so today than I think that they even did back in, the 80s and early 90s when the Dead Milkmen were around. And I had a chance to see the Dead Milkmen. Gosh, where was that? It was club over in Hollywood, and I stood there, and it was like right after they released their album Metaphysical Graffiti, which is another phenomenal album, but this one in particular I feel is like the highlight. And you've got songs like Smoking Banana Peels, the guitar song, Born to Love Volcanoes, RC's Mom. I mean, just the whole entire album is hilarious. And there's a humor and a skill to this album that I just don't see a lot of people doing today. I think humorous-wise, like tongue-in-cheek, maybe Lonely Island was in the same range as far as level of talent and messaging. But even then, these guys are like hitting some really kind of middle sort of salt of the earth, blue collar themes that I don't think that we're hearing about today. So those are just some of the top marks. Another one that I kind of feel like this is in the same vein was Pinkerton by Weezer. So I feel like what Pinkerton was to Weezer, I feel like Beelzebubba was to the Dead Milkmen. Just, an absolute pinnacle, but something that I think was not really appreciated until much later. So that's the first one. Okay, the second album that I think is just phenomenal is an album called Century Flower by a band called Shellyan Orphan. So I was slated to go to the Cure concert in 1989. It was the Disintegration Tour, the Prayer Tour, and they were playing Dodger Stadium. And I was supposed to go to that. We were a bunch of teenagers. I mean, I was, 15 years old. And a buddy of mine, Shiloh, he came back and he said there was this band that was there called Shellyan Orphan. And I think he bought me the CD. It was one of those things where you buy the CD, and he gave it to me, and I listened to it, and I had that thing on heavy rotation nonstop for months. And one of the things about Shellyan Orphan is that it was a guy and a girl singer. They're singing together. Caroline Crawley, who just has an absolutely angelic voice. I mean, she passed away in 2016. But, and Jamar, who's the guitarist, just absolutely beautiful singing, beautiful songwriting. It was this sort of music that I'd never heard before. It had violins, saxophone, it was folk, it was rock, it was kind of all over the place. The compositions were very loose, but the musicianship was very tight. And so me being a kid that I just learned how to play guitar, I started listening to this. It was the first time that I'd really thought, wow, I could utilize folk arrangements in some of the rock songs that I was, playing. And I started thinking about just the multiple voices that I could be utilizing, just inspired by this album because it was so rich in, production and composition and the way that it just flowed together. I just had never heard anything like it. And to be honest with you, to this day, I've never heard anything like Century Flower by Shellyan Orphan. And some of the songs that I really, really enjoyed on it, Shatter, Summer Flies, and Between Two Waves, I just think are just amazing compositions. So if you're just to, look on Spotify, those songs, but just get the, the whole thing. I think Century Flower by Shellyan Orphan is a brilliant, brilliant album. Every song on it is just very, very good to listen to, and I love it. And again, Shellyan Orphan, I can almost guarantee you've never heard of them. I mean, they were on that one tour. They had a couple of other albums after that, but they just never hit the mainstream like I think that they should have. I mean, maybe they were just a little ahead of their time, but it was a really, really brilliant album. The third album on this list is one of my personal favorites, and again, they're all my favorites, but this one in particular, this was the first time that I'd ever heard an album with so much sampling that I was like, wow, what are they doing? How are they doing it? I was mesmerized by the first time that I heard this. And I actually found out later that this album is actually one of the most influential albums amongst music producers and sort of like, very avant-garde sort of music composers. I've heard, references made to it by various different musicians and people that, are musicians that are close to me today. They put this at the top of the list of one of the most influential albums, and it is My Life in the Bush of Ghosts by Brian Eno and David Byrne. So if you know Brian Eno, he's world famous, producer, produced U2 and like a million other amazing bands. And David Byrne is obviously from the Talking Heads. And the fact of the matter is this doesn't sound anything like U2 and it doesn't sound like anything like the Talking Heads, although he did wind up having, as guest musicians, Tina Weymouth on bass, who was from the Talking Heads, Chris France, who's the drummer from Talking Heads. They played a lot on this. Robert Fripp, I think, is one of the guest guitarists on it, which is just outstanding. I'm sure you can look up the list of the personnel listing on Wikipedia or whatever. But man, this album from start to finish, every song is like a unique experience. Every song is like a roller coaster of innovation and ingenuity and emotion and it really just punches you in the face. So this is one of the things that happened to me right about the time that I was listening to this album. I had a really, really amazing opportunity to sit in on a recording session. And this is someone who's very, very well known today. And this recording session had a tremendous impact on my life. The band, they don't exist anymore, but it was a band in the late 80s and early 90s called This Great Religion. Now, the guys in that band, two of them went on to become very, very well-known and famous, tremendously influential in the music scene. One of them was a bass player by the name of Justin Meldal Johnson, and the other one who's a guitarist, who's now, producer, musician, is Tony Hoffer. Now, Tony wound up producing a bunch of stuff for Beck. Justin Meldal Johnson, if you know who he is, he's the musical director for Beck and for a bunch of different bands. St. Vincent, he's recently on tour with St. Vincent. And, they invited me in to listen to this recording session. And I sat there and, it's like, these are people that I looked up to, like you can't even imagine. And so I was just like a little kid, I was like 15 years old and they were all seasoned musicians and touring and doing all this kind of stuff. And, Justin has the unique, he's uniquely famous for being the person that got me to take music lessons. And so I was like, dude, you owe me. Let me come and listen to you guys record, right? And he's like, all right, you can come and sit in on the studio session, but be quiet and don't make any noise, right? So I sat in the back and just listened. The producer on that album was David Campbell, very famous, multiple Grammy Award winning producer. And so they were like, what this really needs is this needs some sampling. And I was like, what is that? How does that even work? And so what they did, it was an unbelievable experience. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, now today you can just sample and just pull things off the internet and chop them up and just put them into, whatever DAW you want to work on. But at that time, we're still using tape and DAT tapes were relatively new. And so they ran out and they ordered this piece of equipment. Some guy showed up, dropped off this equipment. It was some weird pedal and it was like this gate. You have to hit it. So there's like this, you would hit the microphone and it would allow sounds to go through. And so they did this and I'm sitting there going, what is happening? So what did they do? They ran in the other room. They recorded a bunch of stuff off of various channels on TV. They came back in. They played this random mishmash of things from just flipping through the channels on TV. And they wound up landing on an evangelist on some, channel that, was playing that. And he was like going through his sermon and all that kind of stuff. And then they were hitting it and like these amazing sounds were coming out and just like little snippets of the sermon were coming through. And then they changed the channel with some other snippets from some, sitcom. And, they put it all together and it was like magic watching these guys do this. And I sat back and I was like, this is the coolest thing that I'd ever seen. And then, when I listened back to My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, which I was introduced to a couple years after that, I suddenly realized where they were, pulling some of that inspiration from, because that's exactly what the entire album, My Life in the Bush of Ghosts is it's sampling from like TV shows and old albums of like Islamic singers. They had like, lawyers from TV and news and all these things sampled on there. But every single one of the things that they sampled was so artfully done, and the music that's surrounding it really is, very thematic for that song. And like I said, every song is just an absolute artistic endeavor. Some of the songs that are on there, Mea Culpa is incredible. Jezebel Spirit, which I think is the single that was on there, that's a ridiculously good song sampling an exorcism, right? So if you're like, you want to check that out, I think that's one of the coolest songs ever. Another one is America's Listening, and or America is Waiting. That's the name of the song. America is Waiting. I think that America is Waiting, if you were to listen to that today, that's almost like the theme song for the United States today. Again, not any political parties, but you listen to that and you go, yeah, that is exactly what is happening. America is waiting, for some sort of something or another. Anyway, you can listen to it and hear it. So My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, which is the last one that we just talked about, that one was fairly well known amongst, musical circles. Again, I don't think that is very well known today, but there is another album that was out, and this one, I'm just going to tell you, how I found out about this band was incredible. I went to a concert for another friend of mine's band. Actually, it was Justin. His band was he was in another band called I'm a Robot. And I'm a Robot actually was going to be on part 2. And wasn't going to talk about them on this particular episode. But one of the bands that was opening for them was a band called The Joggers. And so this was in the late 90s. I think it was late 90s. Yeah, it must have been late 90s, right? And maybe early 2000s. And I went to this little bar, and they were playing all these sort of like warm-up gigs for the band I'm a Robot. And there was 15 people in the audience. And I sat 3 feet away from where they were playing. I actually left that concert going, I am one of the luckiest people to have been able to see the Joggers, because they hit me that much that I knew at that time that was going to be a band that was going to influence me. I mean, I bought they were selling CDs, on the little table on the side. I bought one of them and whatnot. And I just listened to their album called Solid Guild. So the Joggers Solid Guild is number 4, and it is phenomenal. I mean, as number 1, as a guitar player, it's amazing. I was just talking to David, producer here, and he was saying that it sounds like a combination of Yes and Vampire Weekend. Right? So I was talking to David, and he said it sounds like a combination of Yes and Vampire Weekend. And I started cracking up. I was like, yes, that's exactly what it sounds like, right? And so Vampire Weekend, they're very famous today. Yes, they were very famous, when they were around. But this is like a perfect combination of the two. One of the things that really got me about this, is the absolute unique way that they play guitar. Now, today, there's a lot of people that play guitar very similar. If you look at Ichika Nito, Japanese guitarist, he does a lot of very big chords and hammer-ons and all this finger tapping and stuff like that. Ichika is in a world of his own as far as skill. But these guys were doing some of the, dual harmonied guitars, tapping, probably alternative tunings and all these different types of things. And I was just floored watching them. Now, yes, I had that impression when I first saw them, but then fast forward much later, now that I had a chance to hear that album over and over and over again, not a bad song on the entire thing. Not a bad song on the entire album. Every song is absolutely brilliant. And so what are some of the songs that I really love? Number 1, Back to the Future, is one of the songs. And the breakdown that they have in that song, the vocal breakdown, probably about 3 minutes into the song, is just incredible. They also remind me a lot of, production-wise of, say, like The Shins and Spoon. So if you like The Shins, if you like Spoon, if you like Yes, if you like Vampire Weekend, you're going to love this album, and I think it's really refreshing to hear something that is just so brilliantly put together. But, another one is Little Kings, is just a really, really great song. Hot Autism is another incredible song. So another one that I thought was just absolutely incredible on the album was Neon Undercarriage. Just great. Blurred Digits, classic. So anyways, I just think that those that if you get a chance to listen to Solid Guild by the Joggers, I think you will absolutely not be disappointed. Some of the things that they do, and this is me becoming sort of musically nerding out, is that they utilize, on a couple of songs, some really interesting rhythmic displacement where they're like, you go, I don't know where the one is. And then you listen to it and you're like, oh, that's where it is. I love it when musicians do that, where they start it off and it's like on sort of a weird upbeat. And then you think that that's the one, and then it changes and the one is someplace else. And so it reminded me a lot of Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except Me and My Monkey by the Beatles, where I've listened to that song, since I was a little kid for 40 years. And I still don't know where the one is on that song. But this will definitely, for the music nerds, you will absolutely love this album. It is brilliant. So top 5 albums that you've never heard of. Number 5. And by the way, these are in no particular order. As you can tell, I am absolutely in love with all of these albums. They're just amazing. But another one that was just had a tremendous amount of influence in my life was an album called Breakfast with Girls by Self. This is one of my favorite albums, and let me tell you why. Number one, all of the songs, again, are brilliantly composed. They are just phenomenal. Matt Maffey is the guy that everybody knows to be, the brains behind Self. Most recently, I saw them on their, I think it was 25th anniversary tour of their album Subliminal Plastic Motives, which is another great one. The album that really kind of like opened my eyes to them is an album called Gizmodery. And they do a song, a version of What a Fool Believes, and it's all played on toy instruments that you could buy from Toys R Us. I mean, they're all toys. And first of all, if you understand, What a Fool Believes is a remarkably complex song. The arrangement of it in and of itself, Michael McDonald, just brilliant. But then to play it on toy instruments that you got from like Toys R Us or whatever, just makes it that much more. You listen to it and go, man, these guys have some mad skills. I was living in Florida. This is where someone turned me on to this band Self. And I was like, all right, I'll listen to them. Then I decided, okay, I'm going to listen to Breakfast with Girls. And from the first second that I listened to it, I was like, oh my God, what am I listening to? The first thing that really hit me like a ton of bricks when I was listening to it was the production. The production and the skill and the attention and the care that went into recording Breakfast with Girls. I mean, I could see it right away. The hard work, I haven't been in recording sessions myself. I was just like, wow, this is absolutely brilliant. And come to be, to learn justifiably so, Matt Maffey is one of the most brilliant musicians and producers on the planet. Especially there was a couple of songs, Meg Ryan, another one is the Uno song. And then probably my favorite song on the entire album was Paint by Numbers. There's songs that you wish that you wrote, you listen to, and you go, man, I wish that I wrote that song. For me, the number one song that I wish that I ever wrote was This Charming Man by the Smiths. I think it is the absolute perfect, most brilliant song. There is nothing wrong with that. It's a perfect 10 of 10 song. But I listened to this and I said, you know what? Paint by Numbers, that's another one that I wish that I wrote, because it is that brilliant. And the whole thing, from start to finish, the entire album is just absolutely incredible. Anyway, those were just 5 of the albums off the top of my head. I said, you know what are some albums that are just not getting any play right now? You get these songs that, Run Up That Hill, Kate Bush, these are getting some new life as they're getting, revisited. But I wanted to dig deep, not only some deep tracks, but some deep albums that you were just like, man, I've never heard of these guys before. Because I think that if you listen to this, you're going to get some newfound appreciation. If you went out and bought these, full albums on, Spotify or Apple Music or Amazon, I don't think that you're going to download any of these and just be like, oh man, this wasn't worth it. These inspired a generation as a whole. You could take any one of these albums and, listen to, bands, like I said, Vampire Weekend, Muse, Coldplay, you could hear like some of these elements in these bands that are really famous today. I think that you would like ask them and go, have you ever heard of this? And they'd be like, oh man, that was really great. Yeah, I love that album. That's so great. That inspired. So these are just some of the ones that inspired me through the, 80s, 81 being My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, all the way up until the early 2000s with the Joggers and Breakfast with Girls. But, hopefully you'll enjoy these two. Again, I encourage you, download them. They're awesome. And you'll have fun with it. Let me know in the comments. Are you fans of these albums already? Do you listen to them regularly? Are there other, albums that you think would be, on the list? What are some of the ones that inspired you? What are some of the things that you're listening to, now and that you have listened to for 20 years that, other people just don't know about? Let's get the comments full of, feedback on like, hey, what are some hidden gems that people will enjoy that they just haven't heard about from before? And I'm going to do another episode on this particular topic, and I've got another 5 albums totally picked out for you guys to enjoy. And then, this might be a regular thing on a from time to time in order to be able to mix it up. So anyways, thanks for tuning in to the Coleman Nation. If you enjoyed this episode today, make sure that, you hit the subscribe button, that you comment, let us know what you liked, give us some, positive feedback on that. Make sure that you subscribe and that you hit the notification so that you can, be the first to know when we drop new content. So with that being said, thanks again for tuning into the Coleman Nation. And we appreciate you, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.